Okay, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the presentation. Thank you so much for being here. And let's push this button there. There we go. Now we are live on all of our. He bought his collar from Amazon. Boy, I tell you what, the trolls need attention today. They're again, pardon me. You're trolling clergy on a Friday night. Dude, your life really. That's you're trolling clergy on Friday night. Really? That's what you're going to do? And I read Thomas Aquinas, by the way. Thank you very much. I read Thomas Aquinas, the Summa Theologica. I listen to Gregorian chant. And what do? I'm going to troll that clergy member. Whew. Well, I tell you what, guys. Yep, there we go. Let's go ahead and take care of this little problem. Excuse me 1 second. Oh, man. He put sub chat on. I did. So now the only people that can chat are subscribers on TikTok. I tried. I tried. Friends on TikTok, I did. I said I would try to leave the chat open to everybody if people would just be nice. They couldn't be nice. Typical. So that's it. I put sub chat. I tried. I mean, no sooner than I put it 10 seconds, people were trolling on TikTok, saying nasty things. So, but there we go. There we go. Every time, but it's not just me. It's everybody. It's not me. I mean, that's what they do on a Friday night. I still think, I'm sorry. I still think it's pretty hilarious. You're trolling clergy on a Friday night. I mean, of all things that you could do. I mean, that's like sad. That kind of is sad. Everybody, I think we should take a moment. We should take it a moment. Let's pray. And Heavenly Father, we pray for the trolls who have nothing better to do. No friends, clearly. And they just need attention. They need attention. So we pray that they get the attention that they so deserve. Amen. That was a pretty prayer. That was a very pretty prayer. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, everybody, I'm Bishop Long. Happy Friday to you. It's our Paranormal Friday night at 8 o'clock, as we've been doing for about 6 years now. I've been doing it for 23. So for those of you who are new, we're here every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, for those of you who can't quite understand why clergy is actually talking about the paranormal, we talk paranormal one time a week. That's it. Once a week. That's all. That's it. No more. For about 1 hour and 45 minutes or so. That's it. The rest of the time, we are teaching Bible study. We're doing night prayer. I'm doing homilies every single time we're on. And even tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will have night prayer. But one time a week. So for those of you who keep saying, you're always talking about the paranormal. No, they're princess. One time a week. And that's it. That's what we're going to be doing tonight. And we're going to have a very cool show. So for those of you who like the paranormal, thank you very much. Tonight is the night we're going to talk about Roswell. And that's a very, very interesting, I tell you what, that has always interested me. Always. And we've lost over 100 people already because they couldn't troll on TikTok. I mean, think about that. 100 people have left because they couldn't troll. I can't do it with a serious face. I can't. I try. I just, my life is so boring. And it's fascinating me that people wait. They just wait. They're just like, is it 8 o'clock? Is it 8? Is it? Yes. Refresh. That's what they're probably refresh. Is he on yet? Is he on? Yes. Yeah. I'm going to say something. That's going to, you buy your collar from Amazon. Whoa. That was a Sorry. I know it's not very, okay. Christian faith, serious face now. All right. That's what someone said. Yeah. Yeah, they practiced it all day. They practiced it all day long. I'm going to make sure I type it out right. All right, folks, I'm Bishop Long. You got to laugh at these people because if you don't, you start cussing. Okay, listen, I'm Bishop Long. There we go. See you later. That's it. Show's over. That's it. We're done. The trolls came in and we had some entertainment, and that's it. You want me to prove that the paranormal exists? Look at some of the trolls. Boy, I tell you what. Yeah, great show. Great show. Everybody, I'm Bishop Long. If you want to go to my website, you certainly can, because if you have nothing else better to do or you want to have something to put you to sleep, go to Bishop James Long, Long. Follow that up with a.com. Now, if you do that, I want you to go over and make sure you check out the books section. And if, of course, the trolls can't say anything now because I've turned them off. And, if you go to Bishop James Long, click on the books and click that and purchase all those books. Purchase every single one of them. Every single one of them. Let's see, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Oh, there we go. You're a fraud. Now, that took 4 1,000, a 4 1,000 count. So that's not too bad. For those of you who don't know, 100% of the profits of my books are going to the MKS Kids Foundation. It's an organization that's an orphanage that we are partnering with. So that's what we're doing. And normally when you write a book, 100% of the profits should go to you, as it should, because you're the author and it's your work. But as a community, we're donating 100% of the profits to the MKS Kids Foundation. So I think that's very nice. And also, if you go to resources, bishopjameslong.com, click on the resources link. You can certainly do so. There's a lot of resources there for you. Other books, Willie Windwalker's books, Andrea Perrin, Jason McLeod. Please make sure you keep Jason McLeod in your thoughts and prayers. He actually worked with the Warrens. He is going through cancer treatment. So please consider which the treatment is responding favorably, which is good. So make sure you continue to keep him. I was friends with Lorraine. I did not, but I would never work with her on a case. Yep. My mom's cookbook. My mom she was a great cook. And I kept saying over and over and over to her, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. She's like, oh, no one will buy it. No one will buy it. I'm just a simple at-home mom. Well, she worked. But she always, I'm just a simple at-home mom, work. It's like, what are you talking about? Who cooks? I said, you work. You come home. You've always cooked for us. It's always been so. But so anyway, I have that for her as well. So, and now the store is, okay, so here's the dealie, yo. So right now, I do have an online store. I am going to have that up eventually. I'm working on a few things now to get everything taken care of. So that will be up probably within the next couple of days. It's up there now, but people have to email me, and that's just too complicated. So I'm working on that. And then there's a fundraiser link. If you could help our friend, Bishop Campbell, he's a good friend of ours. And Bishop Campbell he has a beautiful heart. He is not a prosperity preacher. He is a man who's dedicated his entire life to serving the poor. And so, he's got a lot of health issues. His wife has a lot of health issues. So if you can go to bishopjameslong.com and just click on the fundraiser link there, and you'll see his direct donation to him. So, yep, Julia. And then if you scroll down, there's also the MKS Kids Foundation. So if you would like to do help them out with the GoFundMe, you can do that as well. So there's plenty of ways to help, and that is wonderful. All right. And then, of course, the church's site is usocc.org. And don't forget, we are going to have our fun-filled, exciting presentation tonight on UFOs. So let's get into this. It is Friday. We got a lot to cover, and the time is ticking. Here we go. Since I was a kid, I always read about the Roswell incident. I talked to Willie Windwalker Gibson about it. His thoughts on the Roswell incident. And he is convinced that Roswell, that there was something there. And after doing a lot more research on it and talking to people, I'm convinced that there's something else as well. There's no doubt in my mind. And tonight I'm going to present some evidence that you might or might not have heard about before. And I think after you hear everything, I think at least it's probably going to leave you with the idea that something doesn't sound right with the official, the official statement. Now, as we all know, President Trump just recently stated that he's going to release a lot of the UFO files. We shall see. People ask me often, do I believe in aliens? Yes. Yes, I do. I don't believe we are the only species. I just don't believe it. If you go 42,000 miles per hour from Earth to Jupiter, it will take you 10 years. 10 years. Let us. Yep, that's on air. It's backwards. It says on air. So it takes you 10 years just to get to Jupiter at 42,000 miles per hour. Now, our solar system is very small. When you think of the whole universe, we're minuscule. I mean, we are a drop in the bucket. There are billions of galaxies just like ours, billions. And the idea that we are the only species out there, I just disagree. Now, my problem is this. People ask me, well, what do you think about aliens? Do you think aliens are demons? No, because as I said before, demons don't need spaceships to fly around. And furthermore, I'm concerned about alien life, if in fact they have visited us, because if they have, then that implies that they are far more advanced than we are. Far more advanced. That's a problem. That's a little scary to me. But let's get into one of the most profound UFO incidents that ever happened in the United States, maybe even the entire world. And that is the Roswell incident. All right, close your eyes for a moment and picture southeastern New Mexico. Flat horizon, endless shrub, dry heat baked into the soil. So it's early July 1947. Now keep in mind the Second World War has ended, but peace, it feels fragile. The atomic bomb has already been used. The Cold War is forming in quiet rooms behind closed doors. And as Roswell Army Airfield sits the most powerful military unit on Earth, and everyone needs to be aware of this, the 509th Bomb Group. They are the most powerful military unit on Earth at that time, without hands down. 509th Bomb Group. The only atomic strike force in existence in 1947. And the early hours after a violent thunderstorm, something comes down northwest of town. Not gently, not intact. It actually breaks apart across the desert floor. Within 48 hours, the United States military will announce that it has captured a flying disc. That is what they said. And strangely enough, within 4 hours of that announcement, they will deny it. So tonight, we're not repeating folklore. We're going to reconstruct a historical event. We're going to talk about dates, names, times, documented press releases, sworn testimony, and with a question that has never gone away. Why did the story change so quickly? Now, some people may say, well, it was a misidentified information. No. In a moment, I'm going to destroy that argument. So welcome to the Sacred Division. I've been doing this show for 2001, 25 years. Oh. Place where history coughs in the wind and mystery refuses to stay buried. I'm your guide, and I'm broadcasting from a quiet studio that feels a little too quiet, a little too still. Tonight, we're going to wander into one of the most enduring enigmas of the 20th century, the Roswell incident of 1947. This episode is a careful expedition through original records, contemporaneous reports, evolving testimony, cultural furnace that turned a desert crash into a global legend. We're going to separate what was documented at the time from what memory, rumor, sensational storytelling later insisted upon. And yep, we'll lean into the spooky, the atmosphere, the questions, the almost visible seams where fact phrased into fiction. We begin with the setting, the landscape, the timing, the people who were there, the fragile border between perception and reality. Let me tell you this. When governments hide something, they don't always do it with dramatic secrecy. Sometimes they do it with paperwork. Sometimes they do it with silence. Sometimes they do it with a knock at the door. Tonight, we're not focusing only on aliens. We're going to also going to focus on behavior. Because regardless of what crashed near Roswell in July of 1947, the response from authorities raises a different kind of question. As I investigated this case, and I was digging back more and more layers and talking to people, I realized there is something more to this story. Was there intimidation? Were records altered or removed? And if so, why? Let's start what we can document. All right, first of all, I want to talk about the 509th Bomb Group. So Roswell Army Airfield housed the 509th Bomb Group. This was not an ordinary base, my friends. You need to realize the 509th had dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So these men operated under extreme secrecy. Security clearance was layered. Everything was compartmentalized. It was standard practice. Loose talk was not tolerated. It didn't exist. In 1947, keep in mind as well, violating national security could not only destroy your career or even worse. So when civilians later describe being told to stay quiet, we have to evaluate those claims in context. So the culture of the base, it was already one of silence. That does not prove intimidation, but it establishes the environment. To understand Roswell, you have to understand the temperature of 1947. So the year 1947, the war has ended, but a different kind of war. The Cold War begins in earnest. So in the American Southwest, the air feels dense with secrets and possibility. The sky is busy with test flights, new materials, the kind of radio chatter that makes a clear truth feel just out of reach. A layered description of Roswell and its surroundings, the ranches, the air bases, the military presence, the weather patterns, social climate of post-war America. So it's important to note the airfield, which is RAAF, and its role in surveillance and reconnaissance during the late 1940s. So the era's tendency to classify and circle rumors with a protective shell of official business. In this twilight space between summer and rumors, we meet the first factors: local ranchers, sheriff's deputies, and a young air base that would soon become a theater for question that outlived their era. Thank you very much. So we're going to talk about Mark Brazel's discovery the weather's stubborn persistence, and the moment the story begins, its ascent into myth. The United States is powerful at this time, but nervous. The Soviet Union is no longer an ally in 1947. Nuclear secrets are guarded with extreme intensity. And the Army Air Forces are transitioning into what will soon become the United States Air Force. Radar systems are expanding. Experimental aircraft are being tested in remote deserts. It's important to set up the history before we get into the sensationalism, because I think the history is just as sensational. So, and on June 24th, 1947, private pilot Kenneth Arnold reports seeing 9 crescent-shaped objects near Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is beautiful, for those of you who don't know. He describes them moving like a saucer skipping across water. Now, this is a pilot. The press seizes on that phrase. Thank you. It said flying saucers. Within days, sightings explode across America. Most are fleeting lights. Roswell will not be fleeting because Roswell leaves debris. And debris, in this case, changes everything. Now, multiple accounts confirm severe thunderstorms across Lincoln County in that area on July the 2nd and July 3rd, 1947. It was lightning, heavy rain, powerful winds. Rancher William Mac Brazil later tells reporters that he heard an explosion during the storm. Not thunder, something sharper, something unusual. But he does not investigate immediately. Life on a ranch does not pause for curiosity. It's not actually until days later, likely the 4th or 5th of July, that Brazil rides across the Foster Ranch and sees something very wrong. Debris scattered across a wide area, not burned, not embedded in a crater, just scattered. He later describes it publicly as rubber strips, tinfoil, rather tough paper, and sticks. So that description becomes important because it does not match what Major Jesse Martell will later say. So Brazil collects pieces. He brings some home, and his family actually handles it. According to later retellings, the material does not behave normally. Foil that crumbles but returns right back to its normal shape. Beams that cannot be snapped. Symbols on metal-like fragments. And eventually, Brazil becomes uneasy. Flying saucer headlines are everywhere. So, on about the July the 6th or the 7th, he drives into Roswell and speaks with Sheriff George Wilcox. And the sheriff then contacts Roswell Army Airfield. At that moment, this becomes military intelligence. Now, I promise you, we'll get to your questions, but what I do for the first hour or so, I do a presentation, and then we'll go from there. Now, I'm not doing the whole entire presentation because I have this is a 95-page paper that I put together for everybody. I overdo it. I always do. It's always better to have more information than not enough. So this is what happens. So the sheriff contacts Roswell, and Major Jesse Marcel is dispatched. Now, friends, this is not a random officer. He is the intelligence officer of the 509th Bomb Group. Remember that group that I talked about? They were the elite. So he handles classified material every single day. He knows reconnaissance debris. He knows balloon technology. He knows aircraft construction. Again, this is an intelligence officer, the intelligence officer. Marcel later recounts the experience in a 1978 recorded interview with physicist Stanton Freeman. This is an actual quote in 1978 that this intelligence officer says. Again, he's a major, and he says, "It was not anything from this earth. I am quite sure of that." Now, critics say memory fades over 30 years. That's true. But Marcel did not give vague recollections. He gave specific physical descriptions. He also says it was a material that you could not bend, you could not dent, even with a sledgehammer. It was extremely lightweight. He also describes symbols, sort of a hieroglyphic in nature, not English, not Russian, not identifiable. Remember, friends, where this is happening. At the base that houses the world's only atomic squadron. These men are not unfamiliar with advanced technology. They're very, very familiar. If Marcel, who was the top intelligence officer in the 509th, if he was confused about balloon debris, that raises a lot of questions. If he was not confused, that raises more. This man was an intelligence officer who had extremely sensitive, highly classified information. He would know if it was a weather balloon. He would also know if it was Russian, Chinese, or any other language. Now, and he made it very clear, in 1978, this was not of this world. So July 1947, Roswell Army Field issues a press release authorized by Base Commander Colonel William Blanchard. Listen to this. Now, this is what the field release actually released. This is what they said. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence officer of the 509th Bomb Group was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc. Let me read that to you again. Again, this is what they released, official statement. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence officer, who I just told you, of the 509th Bomb Group was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc. Gain possession of a disc, not debris, not balloon material, a disc. That statement runs in newspapers nationwide. And the Roswell Daily Report prints it with bold headline, RAAF. That's the airport. That's the, well, I've already explained what that was. It captures a flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. That was headlines all over the United States. Now keep in mind, they said they have a disc in their possession. And then within hours, what happens? Higher command intervenes. Major Marcel is flown to Fort Worth, and there, General Roger Ramey announces the object was merely a weather balloon. I understand the rule of command, but I would be furious with if I were Major Marcel. I mean, that just completely diminishes all of his credibility as a top investigator when he clearly stated, yeah, it was a disc. What happens next is photographs are staged. Marcel, what they do is Marcel kneels beside foil and sticks. The narrative shifts. Case closed, except Marcel, the intelligence officer, says decades later that the debris in those photographs were not what he recovered. Ooh, now this is getting interesting, isn't it? But it gets better. Major Jesse Marcel said this in 1978. They substituted something else and photographed me with that. If that statement is true, that's not confusion. That is replacement. That is cover-up. And replacement suggests intent. Now, the official narrative emerges. The mogul theory, debris identification. Thank you very much, Becky. So within days, a formal explanation begins to emerge. The official line evolves, and the public face of the incident changes shape. July 8, 1947 press release, the initial announcement referencing the recovery of debris from a flying disc, thank you very much, emphasized the sensational phrasing and the immediate media firestorm. So debris, and it says again, July 1947, debris identified as belonging to a weather balloon from Project Mogul, a top secret operation designed to detect sound waves from Soviet nuclear tests. Explanation of Project Mogul's purpose: the use of high altitude balloons, radar reflectors, and the tech context of the time. Let's talk about Project Mogul. So in 1994, nearly 50 years later, the U.S. Air Force releases a report titled The Roswell Report, Fact versus Fiction, in the New Mexico desert. The conclusion? The debris came from Project Mogul. Project Mogul was a classified program using long balloon arrays with acoustic sensors to detect Soviet nuclear tests. It existed. It was secret. It involved balloons and radar reflectors. On paper, it fits. But critics raised several issues. First, descriptions. Mogul debris consisted of neoprene balloons, balsa wood, radar reflectors made of foil and sticks. Nothing exotic, nothing indestructible. Second, thank you very much, timeline. And this is important. Some researchers argue that specific Mogul flight, often cited flight number 4, may not have successfully launched at all. Records from that period are incomplete. And third, the messaging. If Mogul was the truth, why say weather balloon in 1947? Why not say classified equipment? Why issue a flying disc press release at all? The simplest answer is error. The more complex answer is damage control. Thank you, Jenny. So up to this point, we've discussed, I think, can be framed as confusion. A storm, debris, a rushed press release, an intelligence officer clearly stating that he saw something out of this world, a disc, then a correction that is manageable, and governments make mistakes. But what moves Roswell from administrative error into something darker is what several witnesses, thank you, later described as a second sight. Not debris, bodies. And this is where the temperature changes. Because even if part of this is accurate, the implications are not historical, they are existential. So let's talk about the second crashed site. So in the late 1970s and 80s, researchers began interviewing additional witnesses who had been children or young adults in 1947. Several independent accounts described a second impact area, more intact, more contained, allegedly involving small humanoid bodies. Now, we have to be careful here. There's no official documentation confirming this. But what we do have is testimony. Some consistent, some contradictory, all controversial. But consistency over decades, I think that's worth examining. I want to talk about Glenn Dennis, who was a mortician. So Glenn Dennis was a mortician in Roswell in 1947. Now, he did not come forward immediately, but he did go public in 1989. And he claimed that in early July of 1947, he received unusual phone calls from Roswell Army Airfield, RAAF. The base allegedly inquired about small, sealed caskets, child-sized. Dennis later stated he found this request unusual because standard military casualties would not require such secrecy or specialized containers. And he also claimed a nurse he knew at the hospital confided in him. So I want to share this with you. This is what Glenn Dennis said. She told me they had bodies there, small bodies, large head, thin arms, and the smell. She said it was like anything she had encountered. Dennis said the nurse described autopsies, small beings, large craniums, unusual tissue. He claimed the nurse later disappeared from Roswell. Now, critics point out Dennis could never conclusively identify the nurse in official records. Supporters argue that if this were classified, records would not be accessible. Dennis maintained his story until he passed away. He never materially profited from this. So that's important to know. If he was writing a book on this, people could say, aha, there's intent behind it. He's making a buck. Not at all. Now, sure, it does not prove accuracy, but it complicates, I think, dismissal. Also, there were several child witnesses. Several individuals who were children in 1947 later described military convoys in the desert. They spoke of armed guards, covered trucks, restricted roads. One name that's often cited in early research was ranch foreman Floyd Proctor, who allegedly claimed to have seen a craft and bodies before being forced off the property. Again, this was testimony, not documented evidence, but patterns matter. Multiple independent accounts describe a sealed area, military perimeter control, removal of material by truck and aircraft. So if the first debris field was chaotic and scattered, perhaps the second was more intact. That possibility, I think, is what fuels the belief that Roswell involved more than balloon fragments. So, where would material like this go? Not to a local warehouse, not to a small regional facility. If it were foreign technology or something unknown, it would go to a high security research center. One location appears repeatedly in testimony: Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Yep. At the time, it was known as Wright Field. It was already a hub for aeronautical testing, foreign technology exploitation. And after World War II, captured German aircraft and equipment, they were analyzed there. If the United States recovered advanced material, human or otherwise, Wright Field would be the logical choice. Several witnesses later claimed that crates were loaded onto aircraft departing Roswell for Dayton, Ohio. No manifest has surfaced confirming extraterrestrial cargo, but classified cargo manifest from 1947 remain incomplete. So if bodies were involved, they would not be listed plainly. So why would you take this weather balloon? Why would you transport this all the way to Ohio if you already knew its origins? You would just put it right back into RRAF. But instead, they took this huge long trek across the country. That's interesting, isn't it? Let's explore a difficult possibility. If the debris described by Major Marcel truly possessed extraordinary properties, and if bodies were recovered, the next step would not be public announcement. It would be containment, study, extraction of technological advantage. Consider the environment. Remember, in 1947, the Soviet Union was pursuing nuclear capability. The United States would not risk public chaos or a strategic disadvantage. So programs such as Operation Paperclip had already been demonstrated that the government was willing to operate in deep secrecy to absorb advanced scientific knowledge. So Paperclip brought former German scientists into U.S. research programs quietly. That was an actual true thing. So if the government could quietly integrate human enemy scientists, it could certainly conceal non-human technology. Again, it's a hypothesis, but it aligns with known behavior patterns. In 1997, by the way, the Air Force released another report. Interesting. This one suggested that reports of alien bodies were likely misidentified crash test dummies from high altitude experiments conducted in the late 1950s. Well, there's a chronological problem. The Roswell incident occurred in 1947. The high altitude dummy tests occurred in the early 1950s. 5 years later, the Air Force argued that memory distortion over time may have conflated events. That's possible, I guess. But for witnesses who insisted on July 1947 as the date, so this explanation feels unsatisfactory. The timeline mismatch certainly, I think, fuels suspicion. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Roswell is not what was said, it's what was not said. So Major Jesse Marcel did not publicly contradict the balloon story for over 30 years. Why? Military discipline, fear of ridicule, or direct instruction? Several civilians later claimed that they were warned by military personnel to remain silent. Some described it as veiled threats. Again, testimony, not documented threat letters. But fear was real in 1947. The Cold War was beginning. National security laws were strict. Loose talk could destroy careers or even worse. So multiple Roswell area civilians later stated they were warned not to speak about what they had seen. Some described military officers visiting even their homes. Others described stern warnings delivered on ranch land. Let's discuss some of them. Mac Brazil. We talked about him earlier in the story. So William Brazil was reportedly detained by the military for questioning after reporting the debris. Remember, he's the one that reported it. Newspaper accounts suggest he was kept at the base for several days. And when he emerged publicly, guess what happened? His description of the debris shifted dramatically. Initially, strange and unusual. Later, ordinary balloon material. Was that coercion, clarification? Now, we don't have the transcripts, obviously, of his questioning. What we do know for a fact is this. He was isolated from reporters during part of the military's investigation. Isolation can shape narrative. But isolation alone is not proof of threat. Also, Glenn Davis. Now, Glenn Davis claimed that he was warned by military personnel to stop asking questions about caskets and autopsy. Remember, he was the coroner. He was the one that said that he was given an order about these small coffins. And he described a threatening tone. However, no, obviously, written threat exists. No military memo confirms it, which it wouldn't. His testimony stands alone. Consistent. Now, what was very interesting is about this nurse. I wanted to dig a little bit more into this nurse situation. Remember the nurse that contacted Glenn? One of the most dramatic elements of Roswell's lore is the alleged nurse who confided in Glenn Dennis that she saw these bodies, that their autopsy was performed. Now, if you're a nurse, you're not a doctor, but I mean, you do know if it's a test dummy or if it's an actual being. I don't know how you could possibly confuse the two. She claims she absolutely saw autopsies being performed. You don't perform an autopsy on a dummy. Now, Dennis claimed she described alien autopsy and then vanished. Researchers through the years have attempted to identify her. Some potential names were proposed, but none were conclusively verified. Critics argue that this undermines Dennis' credibility. I don't think so. Supporters argue that classified involvement could erase our records. Here's the grounded assessment. There is no documentary evidence proving the nurse even existed, but there is also no documentary evidence disproving that a nurse could have been reassigned or transferred. Military personnel were reassigned frequently without records, so absence proves little, but it does not prove presence either. In my opinion, I see nothing. Glenn did not benefit from lying in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So when you think about this, there's nothing that he benefited from. So I don't buy it. So right, Judy. Now, several later witnesses claimed armed guards restricted access to certain areas. Children reportedly told not to discuss what they saw. Some described language implying severe consequences for speaking publicly. But we got to approach these carefully. Memory evolves, stories can grow in retelling, but it's also true that in 1947, military personnel would not hesitate to warn civilians away from classified sites, even aggressively. The key question, I think, becomes, were they protecting secrecy about surveillance technology or something else? Now, in 1947, the United States was entering the Cold War. National security paranoia was high. Information control very tight. If civilians stumbled, onto classified military material, well, intimidation would not be surprising. Threats may not have been theatrical. There may have been simple statements like, this is a matter of national security. So in that era, those words carried weight, and you get the point. It's entirely plausible that civilians were warned firmly to remain silent about sensitive debris. Now, that doesn't require aliens, it requires secrecy. But the unresolved issue is scale. So why were they protecting balloon technology or something far more significant? Let's step back for a moment and assess the landscape. Fact. A debris field existed. The military recovered it. A press release used the term flying disc based on what they were told by individuals who were at the site. The story was reversed within hours. Those are facts. Testimony. The testimony is the material behaved unusually. There may have been a second site. Bodies were allegedly transported. Crates may have gone to Wright Field in Ohio. Those things have been those were testimonies. So official explanation evolved over decades. Weather balloon, Project Mogul, crash test dummies. Each explanation addressed part of the story. None addressed all of it. And I think this is where unease begins. At least it was with me, because when explanations shift repeatedly, trust weakens. And when trust weakens, speculation fills the gap. Right, yeah, David. Yeah. And the debris is housed at Wright-Patterson Airfield. And that's the thing. If they already knew what it was, as I mentioned, they would not have taken it to Wright-Patterson. Wright-Patterson Airfield base was primarily for advanced technology, especially technology that was recovered from other countries. Why transport this all the way to Ohio so they could reverse technology? That was very, very important at that time. Well, if it's a weather balloon, doesn't make sense. Was Roswell extraterrestrial? I can't prove it, but I can say this. The response was not ordinary. And extraordinary responses often follow extraordinary events. I've examined the debris. We've talked about the second site claims. We've examined official explanations. Now we examine the most unsettling part of Roswell, the silence. Because events fade, storms pass, headlines disappear, but silence lingers. So let's reconstruct July 8th carefully. Morning, Roswell Army Air Force or Airfield prepares a press release stating they've recovered a flying disc. Okay, that's not a rumor. This is an official military communication. Colonel William Blanchard, he authorized it. And again, I stress, they have recovered a flying disc. I cannot stress that enough. So Blanchard commands the 509th Bomb Group, the Atomic Strike Force. He's not prone to fantasy. So the press release is transmitted to newspapers. The Roswell Daily Record prints RAAF, which again, for those of you, that's a Roswell Army Airfield, captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. Radio stations begin to carry the story. National Wire Service pick it up. Within hours, higher command responds. General Roger Ramey in Fort Worth announces it was merely a weather balloon. As I mentioned, photographs are staged. Major Jesse Marcel is pictured kneeling beside foil and sticks, in which he later says that was reconstructed. They weren't there. Now consider the speed of this reversal. Flying disc is announced. Within hours, it becomes debris from a balloon. This is not gradual clarification. That is hard correction. Correction at that level do not occur casually. They occur when someone higher in the chain intervenes. Why intervene so quickly? Embarrassment? Containment? I want to stress this so much. Colonel William Blanchard at the Roswell Army Airfield authorized the press release stating that they have a flying disc. These are people of the 509th Bomb Group. They were the most elite group in the world. They knew 100%. They knew highly classified information. Now, researchers in later decades discovered something peculiar. Outgoing message logs from Roswell Army Airfield covering early July 1947 are incomplete. So you have Roswell Army Airfield, who has the 509th regime there, who is the best in the world. And you're going to convince us that they're going to have logs that are incomplete? Official explanation: routine destruction, standard archival procedure. All right, well, that might be true. Military record keeping in the 1940s, it wasn't always pristine. But consider the timing. The most controversial military press release in modern history occurs, and certain message logs from that period are gone. Friend, that absence does not prove extraterrestrials, but absence in proximity to controversy always raises the eyebrows. If nothing unusual happened, why is the paper trail thin? Just think about this for a moment. Researchers examining Roswell Army Airfield archives noted that outgoing message logs from early July 1947 appear incomplete. Pages are missing. Official position: routine destruction under records management procedures. That explanation is plausible, I guess. Paper logs were not always preserved indefinitely in the 1940s, but here's the tension. The missing logs correspond to the exact period of the flying disc announcement. Did you hear that, friends? Paper logs. You know this is from Roswell Army Airfield. The logs correspond to the exact dates of the flying disc announcement. Coincidence? Possibly. But investigative analysis, coincidence plus controversy, well, that equals scrutiny. There's no document that says remove these pages. There's no memo ordering destruction. We are left with a huge evidence gap. And gaps create suspicion. But gaps are not proof of conspiracy. Now, let's return to our friend, Major Jesse Marcel. Remember, Major Marcel was with RRAF. So he was there. He was the one who said, I recovered, we have this disc. He also said it is not of this earth. And he also stated that the information, it was not in English, the writings that appeared on this disc was not from, there's no language that he knew. But let's return back to our friend, Major Jesse Marcel. He did not speak publicly until 1978, over 30 years later, because he was nearing the end of his life. He had retired. He had nothing left to gain professionally, no books. And in his interview with researcher Stanton Friedman, again, this is what he said. And this is what Jesse Marcel said. And I want to make sure everybody understands this. He was an intelligence officer, okay, at the Roswell Air Force Field with the 509th. So he was there. I can't stress that is so important to know. And this is what he says in the interview. I am certain what I handled was not a weather balloon. He described material unlike anything he'd ever seen before or since. He stated clearly that the debris photographed in Fort Worth was not the original debris. Now ask yourself, if Marcel was confused in 1947, why double down in 1978? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So let me do this very quickly. I've got to redo the Gram to the Insta. I think this is one of the most fascinating shows that we've done. Because there is so much information that people maybe have never heard about. And the more I dug deeper and deeper into investigating, I'm thinking this is a, well, I'll tell you what I think about this in the end. So let me start this. Bear with me. We'll take a brief little break. There we go. Okay. Perhaps maybe this might intrigue you more to learn a little bit more about the Roswell incident. So what he says was, I am certain what I handled was not a weather balloon. And for those of you just joining us, remember, he was an investigator. So he knew. He was an intelligence officer. Now ask yourself, was he confused? Memory distortion? Marcel was not alone. Other members of the 509th, they later hinted that something unusual occurred. None provided definitive proof, but several implied the balloon explanation didn't fly. Now, Marcel's son, Jesse Marcel Jr., later claimed he handled debris as a child that night when his father brought material home briefly. Remember, Marcel brought the material home, and he described symbols and metallic fragments that returned right back to shape. So they would crumble it up like aluminum foil, and it would just go right back to its normal shape. He described symbols, and skeptics argue childhood memory is unreliable. That's fair. But layered testimonies, they create weight. Now, if Roswell involved something extraordinary, what would the government do? Let's talk about that for a second. If Roswell involved something extraordinary, what would the government do? Let's remove aliens just for a moment. Imagine instead that the debris represented highly classified surveillance technology or perhaps maybe even foreign adversary technology. Public disclosure would be dangerous. We understand this. Yep, David. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, you must be just joining us. We talked about how that allegedly there was a nurse that said there were bodies and she saw an autopsy. Yeah, we talked about that. You must have missed it. So again, let's remove this for a second. Imagine instead that, thank you very much, that it could represent highly classified surveillance technology, foreign adversary technology. Public disclosure, that would be dangerous. The government would need a quick explanation, a simple explanation, and a dismissible explanation. It's all good. So weather balloon, 2 words, unthreatening, forgettable. It does not invite panic. It does not spark strategic concern. And if later pressed, the explanation can evolve. Project Mogul, crash test dummies, memory distortion. Notice the pattern? Because that's what they were saying. Each explanation attempts to normalize. Each explanation attempts to reduce. None expands. That pattern does not prove alien involvement, no, but it does resemble narrative management. So Roswell fades from headlines quickly in 1947. Does not become the cultural phenomena we know today until the 1970s. And the resurgence begins when researchers revisit the case and interview aging witnesses. And suddenly Roswell becomes the cornerstone of UFO lore. Area 51, secret vaults, bodies in freezers. Now, some of this is almost certainly embellishment, but the core remains. A military press release announcing a flying disc and a reversal within hours, that core is documented. Everything else radiates outward from the nucleus. Let's be disciplined here, though. What can we say with 100% confidence, without no ifs, ands, or buts? We can say first, debris was recovered from a ranch northwest of Roswell in early July 1947. Fact. The military issued a press release calling it a flying disc. Fact. A major who was an investigator, an intelligence officer, went out there and he claimed that he gathered this information, even brought it home and described it as something not of this earth. Fact. Again, the government said they recovered a flying disc, a kernel. With the explanation changed to a weather balloon within hours. Decades later, Project Mogul was introduced as a likely source. Fact. Witness described unusual material and possible bodies. Fact. Yeah, guys, I'm not going to answer any questions because if I keep answering questions, because we've already said this, then I keep going back to what I've already talked about and we never finish the story. So hang tight to your questions. We'll address them afterwards because I did answer all these questions already. So what cannot be proven? Well, the debris was extraterrestrial, that bodies were definitely recovered, that Wright Field housed alien remains. We can't prove this. So where does that leave us? Uncertainty. But uncertainty does not equal insignificance. Roswell is not compelling because it proves aliens. Roswell is compelling because of how it was handled. Speed of reversal, inconsistent explanations, missing documentation, long-term silence. If nothing extraordinary occurred, the reaction was strangely intense. And if something extraordinary did occur, the reaction, well, it makes perfect sense. If we look at the behavior pattern, rapid military retrieval of debris, immediate public announcement, swift reversal, controlled media access, witness isolation, decades of silence, later shifting explanations. See, individually, each step can be explained. Together, they create tension. This is the heart of Roswell, not bodies, not spaceships, but trust. If authorities misled the public in 1947 for strategic reasons, that breach echoes forward because once a government lies publicly, even for security, it fractures confidence. And when confidence fractures, mystery expands. 1947, weather balloon. No, it was a 1994. It was Project Mogul. No, in 1997, it was crash test dummies. Each explanation attempts to address specific public questions, but notice the pattern. Each explanation emerges after public pressure increases. If the original explanation had been fully transparent, then additional reports might not have been necessary. This evolving narrative fuels mistrust. However, it is also consistent with declassification cycles. So as classified programs become public decades later, explanations can change. So the shifting story, it's suspicious, but not automatically sinister. But imagine the desert that night. Lightning tears open the sky, a flash, fracture, metal, not metal, raining down across this land. Imagine Major Marcel, intelligence officer, standing in that field holding something that he cannot identify. Who is an intelligence officer? Something impossibly light, impossible to destroy. Something etched into beams that nobody can translate. Friends, you're at a highly classified Air Force base, and no one can translate the language? Imagine the decisions that followed. Who's told? Who's not told? Do we inform the public? Are we not alone? Do we study it quietly, reverse engineer it, weaponize it, understand it before anyone else does? And now imagine standing in front of the cameras an hour later, kneeling beside balloon debris, smiling politely, saying nothing. Maybe Roswell was a balloon. Maybe it was a classified surveillance, or maybe in July of 1947, humanity touched something not from here and decided the world was not ready. And the desert kept its secret. It's fascinating, isn't it? Why would you have in 1947 the commander saying it was a flying disc, and then within hours, Brigadier General Roger Ramey tells reporters only a weather balloon? Do you see how embarrassing that would have been for RAAF? For the Roswell Army Airfield, think about this. These are people who have highly classified information. They say it's a flying disc, and then a Brigadier General Ramey says, "Oh, what's wrong with you people? It wasn't a disc, it was a weather balloon." Completely destroys their credibility. It's like, you don't know the difference between a flying disc and a weather balloon? Everything that follows lives in that gap between announcement and denial. I want to talk a little bit about, before we close this shop, I want to talk about the major Roswell theories that are out there. Okay, because there's a lot of theories. I'm not endorsing the theories, I'm trying to understand them. All right, so I want to share some of the theories that some people say that it was. So the weather balloon explanation, was it really that simple? So the 1947 explanation was straightforward. A rancher, William Brazil, found debris on a property. Military officials identified as a weather balloon. Later, after saying it was a disc, General Ramey posed photographs of the debris. Newspapers corrected the flying disc headline, case closed. Now on the surface, okay, weather balloons are common. Radar reflectors were constructed. Okay, but here's where suspicion enters. Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who first examined the debris, later said the material was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. He described it as thin metallic fragments that could not be bent or burned, and they returned to their original shape when crumbled. Skeptics argue Marcel exaggerated decades later. Why? There was nothing for him to gain from that. The weather balloon theory survives because institutionally it's supported. It collapses for believers because it does not psychologically account for the dramatic initial press release. The key tension, why announce a flying disc at all if it was routine debris? So, the official explanation in 1947, weather balloons were common, radar reflectors used foil, wooden sticks, and General Ramey displayed balloon debris publicly. Why some people believe this? Because it's simple. No verified physical alien evidence exists. Human memories can be unreliable over decades. Why skeptics doubt? Why issue a flying disc press release in the first place? Why was Major Jesse Marcel confused? Why the rapid narrative reversal? Next, Project Mogul, the classified balloon. So in 1994, the U.S. Air Force released a detailed report stating the debris was Project Mogul, top secret program using high altitude balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. Okay. Project Mogul, it did exist. It was classified. Its balloons arrays carried unusual materials, reflectors, etc. If the debris came from Mogul, the military would need to conceal its true purpose. But critics point out the specific Mogul flight, often cited Flight 4, was never even launched successfully. Oh. Some Mogul materials do not fully match witness descriptions. And the explanation emerged almost 50 years later. So some people believe this because Mogul was real. It was classified in 1947. Balloon materials could resemble described debris. But skeptics say nonsense. Some flight records are incomplete. Witness descriptions include unusual properties that's not consistent with Mogul materials. Now, the extraterrestrial craft theory. So there's a theory out there that, yep, it really was an extraterrestrial craft. The claim? A non-human craft crashed near Roswell, was recovered by the military. So, the original press release language, the disc, Marcel's later statements, he described non-terrestrial material. Remember, in 1978, when his health was declining, he was retired, he said, I'm coming clean. This was not a weather balloon. Alleged secondary debris field, rumors to transport to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This theory rests on behavioral argument, though. If alien technology were recovered, the military would absolutely conceal it. 1947, the world just entered the nuclear age, and panic would have been immediate and global. So believers see Roswell as the moment humanity first encountered something beyond itself. So the claim, an extraterrestrial spacecraft crashed near Roswell. The military recovered debris, possibly bodies, then covered it up. Why people believe this theory? The original flying disc press release by the military. Major Marcel's later statements that the debris was not from this earth. Those are his words. And allegations of a second crash site with bodies. And there were transport rumors to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Let's talk about the recovered bodies and autopsies. An extension of the alien craft theory claims small humanoid bodies were recovered and examined. We talked about this earlier in this lecture. Mortician Glenn Dennis later claimed that he received unusual inquiries from the base about child-sized coffins and preservation techniques. Other witnesses described small beings with large heads. The nurse. In the 1990s, alien autopsy footage surfaced, later admitted to be staged. So why does this belief persist? Well, multiple witnesses describe similar forms. Allegations of intimidation reinforce the suspicion. The ideas of bodies feel consistent with the crashed craft narrative. Now, skepticism persists because there's no medical documentation. Well, there wouldn't be. Key witnesses emerged decades later, probably because they were afraid. So the theory thrives because it humanizes the event. It shifts from debris to beings. That makes the story, I think, visceral. There's also the theory of reverse engineering and technological leaps. So this theory suggests that recovered materials were funneled into secret research programs, leading to breakthrough in aerospace electronics. It's fascinating, isn't it? How do we go from the 1950s, where we have very limited technology, very limited. I mean, to all of a sudden, we put a man on the moon 20 years later. We see this explosion of technology between the 1950s, 1980s. Now, this theory suggests supporters who say that they're reverse engineering, they connect Roswell to Wright-Patterson, Area 51, black budget research, which is a true thing, rapid technological advances in the 1950s and 60s. They argue that technologies like fiber optics, microchips, stealth aircraft appeared too quickly. Critics counter this innovation timelines as well, documented by driven conventional research. Okay, that's perhaps because there's programs like Operation Paperclip proves that the U.S. government quickly absorbed advanced foreign science after World War II. So the question becomes, if they secretly absorbed certain German scientists, why wouldn't they secretly study alien debris? The logic is behavioral, not physical. The theory claims that Roswell debris was funneled into secret research programs to reverse engineer alien technology, often tied to Wright-Patterson, and then later to Area 51. Certainly makes sense to me. There's another theory claiming that the debris was advanced Soviet surveillance equipment. Some fringe versions suggest Stalin engineered a UFO panic using unconventional aircraft. The theory relies on the Cold War context. So in 1947, U.S.-Soviet tensions were escalating rapidly. If the debris were foreign intelligent equipment, secrecy would be expected. However, no credible Soviet documentation support that scenario. The appeal of this theory lies in geopolitical realism. So it frames Roswell not as a cosmic, but as strategic. And believe it or not, I've heard this theory. Most extreme versions suggest Stalin attempted to stage a UFO incident to create panic. And they actually put bodies with enlarged heads inside these aircraft, if you will, to cause a UFO panic. There are some people who believe this. 1947 marked early Cold War tensions. But there's no credible Soviet documentation, and the logistics would have been extraordinary. Now, there is a particular technology out there, or a theory out there of a Germany disk technology. It starts with the N, or the Yahtzee, the Yahtzee. The theory claims that Germany developed experimental flying discs and that Roswell debris originated from those designs. It often connects a secret Antarctic bases and post-war relocation of German engineers. While Germany experimented with unconventional aircraft concepts, they did. Historians find no evidence of operational disc craft. So that complete theory. There's another theory, it was just a military experiment failure. So that suggests that Roswell involved in classified U.S. aircraft surveillance platform that crashed. Supporters say New Mexico was a testing hub. The military routinely concealed experimental failures. The flying disc language may have been confusion or media exaggeration. No, that's what they said. Some people believe that the desert Southwest was full of experimental testing. That's true. And the government often concealed failures. That's true. The simplest explanation may involve human technology. But there's a lot of people who doubt it. Witnesses describe materials beyond 1947 capabilities, and the major would have known. He was an intelligence officer. The flying disc language remains difficult to explain. There's also, it's very interesting, a myth evolution theory. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Finally, some argue Roswell evolved into legend through cultural amplification. The UFO wave of 1947, the 1970s resurgence of UFO research, book, documentaries, and conferences. So human memory is reconstructive. Stories grow. This theory suggests Roswell began mundane and accumulated extraordinary elements over decades. So supporters cite the delay in many dramatic testimonies. Critics note that the original press release remains difficult to dismiss. So why do all these theories survive? Each theory fills a different psychological need: simplicity, secrecy explanation, existential wonder, geopolitical realism, distrust of institutions. Roswell is a canvas. People project onto it their relationship with authority, science, and the unknown. The longer uncertainty persists, the stronger alternative narrative become. Roswell has never provided closure, and when history refuses closure, imagination will move in. There's also a sociological theory, argues Roswell grew into myth, memory distortion, cultural reinforcement, 1970s UFO resurgence, media amplification. Okay, perhaps not. Roswell may never yield definitive proof. It may remain a puzzle, but his power does not come from evidence alone. It comes from uncertainty. From that press release in 1947, from the speed of the reversal, from the decades of evolving explanation, Roswell is not just about a crash, it's about trust. And once trust fractures, the mind searches for meaning. Maybe it was a balloon. Maybe it was classified surveillance. Maybe it was something not from this earth. What keeps Roswell alive is not certainty, it's possibility. And possibility, once introduced, is very difficult to bury. And that, my friends, is your presentation on Roswell. A lot there, isn't it? A lot more than people think. When you dig and dig and dig, and you're like, my goodness, there's so much more. So much more. And it almost gets to the point where it's overwhelming. And I've had to, when I was doing this presentation, I had to cut out so much because there is so much information on it now that it's like, okay, I can't talk about this. We'll never get through it. But nonetheless, I definitely covered the main points, and that is the most important part. Okay. I do have some very interesting articles that I want to chat with you guys about. And let's go into, okay. If you have questions, about, we'll try it. I'll see how long this will last. I'll put chat on for everybody on TikTok. If people are not going to be nice and kind, I'll put sub chat back on for the rest of the night. So I have to put sub chat on because people are so rude and mean and just say some of the most god awful things. So we don't put up with that here. We just don't. Okay. Now let's talk about some articles, guys. This is cool stuff. Yeah, Skinwalker Ranch is very interesting. I'll have to do a presentation on Skinwalker again. And the Bob Lazar story. I mean, there is so much. There's so much out there. What do I believe? I think Roswell was. I believe that they captured something, and I don't believe it was. I think it was extraterrestrial in nature. I've done so. I usually do those, Patty, on like Sundays or Wednesdays because that's more of. On Fridays. Fridays is the only time of the week. The only time of the week that we dedicate one show to the paranormal. The rest of the week it's all theology, which is fine. But there's a lot of people say, just keep Friday as paranormal. That's all because I barely even talk about the paranormal anymore. And so Friday's the only time we do it. Yeah. So I think there's something to it. Okay. I think so. I think there's something strange about that. Yeah, the Black Knight theory, that's very fascinating. It's not really I guess it's not a theory. Oh, you went to? I have not been to the Roswell Museum. Is the Roswell Museum, is it rather large or no? For those of you who don't know the Black Knight theory, it's one of those, I think, fascinating topics. Not really, about astronomy, conspiracy lore. Basically, the Black Knight satellite theory claims that an unknown artificial object orbiting Earth long before human spaceflight, and has been watching or even interacting with humanity. So, according to this belief, the Black Knight satellite, according to the belief, it's evidence of an ancient or even alien civilization. Some believe even 13,000 years old, supposedly discovered in orbit by early space missions, I believe. So people refer to Black Knight story, often point to photographs of like strange or dark, irregular shaped objects circling Earth that does not look like a normal satellite. So we actually see this theory, if you will, or the satellite didn't appear all at once. We see, even in 1899, I believe there was some mystery signals in the 1950s and 1960s. 1988, there was what is that called? The STS 88 photo, and that was on the space shuttle Endeavour, photographed a large dark object that was floating in orbit. Maybe we'll do a presentation on that one day. Okay, here it is. I want to talk about this, everybody. So yes, I do believe that this was, that they captured something that was not of this world. That was not of this world. And I believe it's inevitable that eventually we're going to hopefully be told, well, thank you very much, that this is, so everything is from God. Everything created is from God. So the thing is, guys, like I said, look, I'm a space nerd. I went to space camp as a kid. So I'm pretty much right up there in the nerd category. I loved it. I love space. I absolutely love space. In my opinion, there's a lot that we don't know. A lot more than we don't know. Again, at 42,000 miles per hour, if you left Earth and just gone to Jupiter, it would take you 10 years. At 42,000 miles per hour, 10 years. Well, 8 to 10 years. And again, our solar system is very small. We're not very large. So let's get into our paranormal. Guys, I got to get into our paranormal stories because it's very important. So the first paranormal story that I want to talk to you guys about is the Paranormal Activity franchise. Has spent years trying to recapture what made the original movie such a phenomenon, which it has, and made a lot of money. The first film was tiny. I mean, it terrifying in a way that it scared a lot of people. Until the sequel started proving simplicity is actually pretty hard to replicate. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, that's why the latest update on the series feels a little bit more promising, perhaps, than usual. Filmmaker Ian Chusson, who is set to direct the next Paranormal Activity film, recently teased that his take is being built with the franchise core audience in mind. In an interview with Movie Web, he said, "I really did write this thing for the fans, the Paranormal Activity fans." So the franchise started in Paranormal Activity 2007. It was made for an ultra low budget of about $15,000 in production. That's amazing. And went on to earn roughly $194 million worldwide, which made it one of the most profitable horror movies ever relative to cost. So apparently they're going to make another reboot of it, and we'll have to see how it goes. I got to be honest with you, I was never really a fan of the Paranormal Activity movies. Sorry, but we are all God. Yeah, last time I checked, I didn't create the earth. Last time I checked, I didn't create the solar system. Last time I checked, I didn't create the universe. So this idea that we're all God is absurd. Absurd. So that's a theory out there that's being presented, which is absolutely heretical. Okay, there's a very interesting issue going on. Listen to this, guys. DK Randall writes this. Judy Ann, you might be interested in this. Well, thank you very much. Discovery on beach reveals that orcas may be eating each other. So a disturbing find on a beach in Russia has raised the possibility that orcas may be resorting to cannibalism. When Sergei Fomin, a researcher of the Pacific Institute of Geography in Russia, discovered an orca fin along a beach on Bering Island in 2022, it turned out to be something quite significant. The fin showed evidence of teeth marks, indicating that something had been chewing on it. Now, thank you very much. While this is in itself wasn't unusual, as orcas are known to attack, bears, beaked whales or minked whales, this particular fin actually seemed to be that of an orca that had been feasted upon by another orca. When an additional fin was discovered a couple years later, it became apparent that something was happening that scientists had not been previously aware of. For whatever reason, some of the orcas in the region seemed to be practicing cannibalism. An analysis revealed that the fins belonged to the southern resident orcas, which reside near Washington and British Columbia, and that they had been attacked and eaten by Biggs orcas. Now this, the researchers believe may be why the southern resident orcas from large, close-knit groups. At least now we know that cannibalism happens, but I think it is not super common. University of Southern Denmark whale researcher Olga Flitova told Live Science. But I guess it's probably something that we can consider. Certainly they're very, very intelligent, but I would also imagine that perhaps maybe they're territorial. I don't know. It's a fascinating if you think about this. So that's right. Yeah, great whites will absolutely flee. And intelligent and wisely so, because orcas feed on their liver. Listen to this. This is a very interesting, and this is kind of sad because I was actually excited about this, but TK Randall wrote this. NASA says Artemis 3 mission will no longer land humans on the moon. The major policy change was revealed on Friday as the space agency grappled with delays and technical issues. As things stand, the upcoming Artemis 3 mission, which will see astronauts fly around the moon but not land on it, has been delayed multiple times and is now scheduled to launch in April at the earliest. Now, while disappointed, it seemed as though things would otherwise stay on track, and the follow-up mission, Artemis 3, would see the first manned moon landing in over 50 years. Now, though, NASA has come out with a further announcement that has basically upended the entire schedule by revealing that Artemis 3 will no longer seek to land humans on the moon. Instead, it will be a low Earth orbit flight launched sometime next year to test docking maneuvers. The actual manned landing will be attempted by Artemis 4, 2028, possibly. These changes are down to a number of issues, but mostly due to ever-increasing delays behind the scenes and technical issues that have plagued the Artemis program for years. The more incremental approach will give NASA a bit more breathing space. Quote, everybody agrees this is the only way forward, said NASA's administrators Jared Isaacman. I know this is how NASA changed the world, and this is how NASA is going to do it again. Why are we acting like we've never been to the moon? This is, I don't understand this. We act like we've never been. How can we land in the moon in the late 60s and the 70s with the technology we had then, and 50 years later, we have all these technological issues and we can't land on the moon? We landed on the moon 50 years ago, didn't we? I'm just saying that raises serious eyebrows. And we act like we don't have the technology. I mean, after 50 years, over 50 years, something seems very off. Now, I know what people are going to say. There's newer technology. You have to dock here. You have to dock there. A block there, dock. You're a dock. Everywhere, dock. Look, the point of the matter is, if we can land on the moon in the 1960s, then by God, we should be able to land on the moon pretty easily in 2026. You know, I have heard the theory that we did not. Now, that theory, I think, holds a little bit of weight. And I'll tell you why. At that time, remember, the United States and the Soviet Union were in a race for technological achievement. And they were going full force, full steam ahead. The problem was that NASA fell behind. We fell far behind. Remember, we were not the first to orbit Earth. Russia was. Russia was up there orbiting, and that was Sputnik. That was a major problem. That we were pretty far behind. So the theory is somehow we were able to manage to land on the moon while at the same time bankrupt Russia, because Russia was spending millions and millions and millions of dollars into the program, and we just thought, well, why don't we just stage it? Instead of pumping all that money into the program, they staged it. The theory is they staged it and bankrupt the Soviet Union, which it did. That, I will tell you, it did bankrupt the Soviet Union. That's the theory. So, can you teach people about how to be Cain and believe in God? I'm not Cain. I don't understand. You'll have to explain that to me. So that's very strange. That's very odd to me. But I see the argument. And here's what was also very interesting too. It kind of bothered me a little bit. So Neil Armstrong was a very devout Christian. He was very devout. And a gentleman approached him. Neil Armstrong was doing a presentation, a lecture, and he had the Bible in his hand. And he said, it's on the video, you can see it, I want you to put your hand on the Bible and swear. I want you to swear that you walked on the moon. He wouldn't do it. Why not? Why not? So if you can go on Tube to the U, and someone had a Bible, say, swear on the Bible that you actually walked on the moon. He wouldn't do it. That makes me think, Rutrow, there's a little bit of a problem there, isn't it? We'll do one more, and then we're going to have to wrap things up. Listen to this story. This is a very interesting story, guys. And I wanted to share this with you. Another interesting UFO story, if you will. D.K. Randall wrote this. UFO hacker Gary McKinnon found files referencing non-terrestrial officers. Listen to this. The 60-year-old made global headlines news back in 2000 when he hacked into U.S. government systems. It was one of the most hotly debated news stories of the decade, and even today. And more than 20 years later, questions still remain over exactly what Scottish hacker Gary McKinnon actually found. Accessing the internet in the early 2000s from his girlfriend's London apartment, McKinnon managed to gain access to restricted NASA and U.S. military computers in an effort to find evidence on UFOs and extraterrestrial visitors that was being covered up by the U.S. government. His clandestine skills were matched only by his naivety. So, in other words, when he was caught, he ended up facing demands for him to be extradited to the U.S. to stand trial for crimes that would have been most likely have him spend the rest of his life in prison. The case received coverage around the world and fueled extensive debates over whether McKinnon, who was fit to stand trial, or should be forced to go to the U.S. He had Asperger's syndrome. Fortunately for him, Home Secretary Theresa May ultimately blocked his extradition. More than 2 decades on, McKinnon still talks about what he found on the U.S. government system. Speaking recently on An American Alchemy with Jesse Mitchells, he described seeing images of a strange cigar-shaped vehicle that was incredibly smooth with no lines, screws, or bolts. Quote, "It wasn't your normal space stuff, so I knew that," he said. He also found a spreadsheet containing details of non-terrestrial officers, seemingly a reference to extraterrestrial entities that the U.S. government had knowledge of. It had ship names and fleet-to-fleet transfers, he said. Ultimately, however, and unfortunately, he was unable to save the files, and to this day, there's no evidence of them. Unfortunately, we have to take his word. And then again, could such files soon be released following Trump's recent order to make such documents public? Hopefully, we will find out soon. Very interesting stories. For those of you who are listening to this on podcast, we say goodnight to you guys. So there we go, friends. That was a fun, fast show, wasn't it? I tell you what, it goes by so fast. This is podcasted, and I'm getting ready to upload this now. So let me do this. Paranormal Friday. Publish. All right. You can check this out if you wish by going to bishopjameslong.com and click on the podcast, and then you'll click on the Sacred Division. Folks, no, we're not in a firmament. Remember, they weren't scientists when they talked about the sermon, that they were just trying to explain what they saw in their limited understanding and knowledge. All right, friends, we're going to be live in about 15 minutes. We're going to go live again, probably 10 minutes for our night prayer. I got to run. Remember, your value does not decrease based on someone's inability or refusal to see your worth. You're priceless. Don't let anybody tell you or convince you otherwise. Hopefully, we'll see you all soon in about 10 minutes or so for night prayer. God bless.